I'm in all these like Facebook groups that, you know, around our area or whatever, and I see people that are looking for houses for rent, and they're like minimum of $3,000, and I'm like, how does that make sense? Because I mean, I feel like you could own a house for less than $3,000 a month, but also then you like I've asked people before, why are you renting? And they're renting to save money. So how are you saving for a down payment if you're paying? How are you saving for a down payment if you're paying $3,000+ a month in just rent, and that doesn't count for your utilities or anything else? Like how's that work?
I mean, you do have to have some money up front to buy. I mean, you've got closing costs, you've got down payment. Um, so there are some expenses that you would have in purchasing a home. Um, so I can see that a little bit. I mean, the way that home prices are and the way that interest rates are right now, I mean, $3,000 a month is not an outlandish price to pay per month for a mortgage. Um, so I guess what people are doing is saving for a down payment, which I think is a good idea. Um, I talked to somebody a while ago that was saving, was renting, and had been renting for several years, and was probably going to rent for another year or two to save to have a 20% down payment to put down to eliminate mortgage insurance. I don't know that that was really the best idea. I think if you can save to get a minimum down payment, then you're better off than renting for 4 or 5 years trying to save up 20% to put down to eliminate mortgage insurance. Because once you reach 20% equity in your property, whether that's with you paying down the mortgage or the appreciation of the house, that mortgage insurance is going to fall off. So you might as well use that money that you would have paid in rent to pay down the mortgage to get to the 20% equity rather than paying rent, paying somebody else's mortgage with your rent, saving that 20%. I think you're going to be a lot better off just if you've got the minimum. If you got more, great, but if you just got the minimum amount to put down, go ahead and buy and let your house appreciate, let your payment pay down part of your principal, and eventually that mortgage insurance will fall off of your loan.
I'm trying to I'm trying to remember. I'm the worst homeowner ever because I didn't put down 20% on my first house today.
No, you did not. That was back in '06, 2006.
Yeah.
That was when they were doing 80/20 loans. So
Oh
you
yeah.
got a first mortgage at 80% and a second mortgage at 20%. And we got the seller to pay closing costs. So I think you had $500 that you put down when you purchased your home. $500 out of pocket.
Which they don't even. I mean, do they even have 80/20 loans in it? I don't hear about that very much.
No, they don't. I mean, that was what caused part of the crash in '08 was people were getting into their houses with no money down, no skin in the game. And when it got to be too much, they walked away because they didn't have any equity. They didn't have any of their own money in it. So it was easy to just walk away and foreclose on the property. And
Mm.
they really didn't lose anything. So they do have some down payment assistance programs that can help with the upfront costs of buying a home. Sometimes you can get the seller to pay some closing costs. So you still can get into homes with minimum out of pocket.
So is down because I didn't. Why didn't I get down payment assistance? Is that a first time home buyer thing?
Typically they are. They do have some down payment assistance programs that are not necessarily for first time home buyers. They have to be your primary residence. They won't give you down payment assistance to buy an investment property.
Hmm.
Um, but they will, sometimes there are some programs out there that will give you down payment assistance even if it's not your first home. Now, you are considered a first time home buyer again if you have not owned a home for 3 years. So
Oh.
you can get reclassified for being a first time home buyer if you hadn't owned a home in 3 years.
Hmm. Maybe that's why my first realtor didn't tell me about down payment assistance.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. Usually, you pay a little higher interest rate for a down payment assistance program. The way I explain it to people is most of the time they're not giving you something for free, so you're going to pay for it one way or another.
Somewhere, yeah.
Whether you pay higher closing costs or whether you pay a higher interest rate, they're going to get their money. Um, the way that it makes sense is to, if you don't have that money, you borrow the money, you do pay a higher interest rate, and then you can refinance in a year or two and get your payment down and get that interest rate down um, from your initial loan. But it's kind of helps you, it's like a jump start to help you get into a home to, have that money that you may not have up front to be able to go ahead and get in.
I was just thinking about about my very first house in 2003. And when our mortgage rates were like 3%, and then they went back up, to like in the six and sevens, and people were having a cow. And yeah, I think it was like 7.86% that was my interest rate on my first house. And I didn't think anything about it.
No,
Like, I was like, oh, okay, that's what you pay.
yeah, and that was what you paid, and it's been higher than that before. We got spoiled when it was in the high twos and the low threes, and it was there for a while. And now it's back in the sevens, and it's really not a bad rate historically. It's just seems like a bad rate compared to a couple years ago where they were in the twos and the 3%. So it definitely makes a big difference on your mortgage payment.
So, what are the people so like 20, what was that, 2022, you lock in at 3%, and then you need to move for whatever reason, like, how are they doing that? Like, how are they affording going from 3% to 7%?
I mean, it's definitely a choice you have to make. I think that's why we have low inventory right now, is because the people that either bought or refinanced when the interest rates were low are not moving. Um, Even if they're, have someone we go to church with that has a big house and they're empty nesters, and it would cost them more money to sell that house and move into a smaller house than it would for them just to stay where they are. So there are a lot of people that are just staying because it's cheaper for them to stay in their house at a 3% interest rate than it is to move even into a smaller house at 7.5%. So a lot of the people that are moving right now are people that have to move, whether it's a relocation, for jobs or kids or schools, um, or if they have to have a bigger house or something like that. Those are the people that are moving right now, and they've just got to stomach that higher rate and that higher payment that they're going to pay. But if that's the situation that they're in and they have to move for a specific reason, then that's what they're going to pay.
Ouch.
It does, yeah, it does sting a little bit. But that's the reality. Our hopes are that the interest rates will come down and those people can refinance and get their payments down a little bit. But as of right now, they're not talking about the interest rates dropping too much throughout the year.
Yeah. I'm gonna put you on the spot and make you do, math in your head, but just out of curiosity, like, when you talk about refinancing, so if I have a 7% mortgage rate on, I don't know, a $600,000 house, and I refinance to, I don't know, 5.25, how much is that actually saving you?
Yeah, I mean that's difficult math to do in my head, but I would imagine you're probably going to save yourself $500 or $600 a month.
So it's worth it. That was I guess I was just thinking, like, is it even worth, I mean, I know a
Yeah,
dollar's a dollar, but like,
You have to do your calculations because you do repay closing costs when you refinance. You have hard closing costs that are lender fees and attorney fees and title insurance and those types of things. And then some of the fees, your prepaids, you're almost paying again and then getting reimbursed. So you pay your prepaids at closing, and then you actually get reimbursed from your escrow account from your previous mortgage company. So those numbers are a little bit of a wash, but you do have to figure that out. I mean, if you're these are easy round numbers, but if your closing costs are $5,000 and it's going to save you $500 a month, after 10 months, you're making your money back. You've paid back that 5,000 that it's cost you to refinance, and now that's when you're actually saving $500 a month.
Hmm.
So that's a calculation that we have to do with people when they're looking at that is how much longer do you think you're going to stay in the house? If you're going to stay in the house for 3, 5, 8, 10 years, then that scenario makes sense. If you're refinancing and then 6 months later you're going to move, in essence, you've lost money because you paid $5,000 to refinance and you saved yourself $500 a month for 6 months. That's only $3,000, so it costs you $2,000 to refinance. You might as well have kept your current mortgage and paid it for 6 months and then turned around and moved. So
That's a lot of numbers.
numbers, but it's calculations that we help people with, and to me, just getting a better interest rate is not always the right way to go. It doesn't always make sense to refinance just because you're saving a little bit on your interest rate. You've got to look at the cost and the savings associated with it.
Yeah. So going back to renting versus buying, like in what scenario would it make more sense financially to rent versus buy?
That's a good question.
I have those occasionally.
Yeah. Uh, I think if it's short term is really the only answer that I can come up with is if you're staying for a short period of time, 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years, and you're going to turn around and move to a different area. Um, that to me makes sense to rent financially. Other than that, I mean, it's all a play in the market. I mean, in a declining market, renting makes the most sense because you're not gaining the equity in the property that you own. In a appreciating market, renting doesn't make sense because you're gaining equity in the property that you can use, for down payment on the next house, or a lot of people get equity lines and use that to pay for their kids to go to college, or different things like that. You're basically using the equity that you have in your house to pay for different things. So I had a client that we talked about selling his house at one point, and he had gotten an equity line and he had bought vehicles and various things with that. And when we calculated the numbers, he was basically going to break even when he sold his house. He was going to pay off the equity line, pay off the mortgage that he had, and he wasn't really going to have any money left over. And he was at that point, he was actually okay with that. He said, you know what? I already spent the equity in my house, so there's really no reason why I should get something for selling it because I've already borrowed against it and I've already taken that money and spent it on other things. So I thought that was a good way to look at it. Of course, everybody wants to make money and have money left over when they sell their home. But if you look at it that way, it's like, hey, I already spent the money prior to selling my house. So now that I'm selling my house, I'm just repaying back the money that I already spent.
I forgot what you called you said a declining market or a
Appreciating market.
appreciating market. I have not caffeinated today, so the word was not coming to me. So we're in an appreciating market currently.
Correct.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. Like when we bought our house 8 years ago, I don't know the exact numbers, but we could not afford to live in our house currently. Like we couldn't go out and buy our house right now,
That's right. Yes. We
which
were
is wild.
fortunate to have purchased when we did, and since values have more than doubled from what we paid for our house 8 years ago, yes, we would probably not be able to buy the house that we live in now for what the mortgage would be
Right.
with the
Well, we
higher
could.
interest
We'd be
rates.
house poor.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see the new people that are moving in the neighborhood are people that can afford higher priced homes and higher mortgages than what we currently pay. I'm sure they would love to have our mortgage payment right now.
This is wild to me because, I mean, like our first house was like what you would consider a starter home, you know, your standard 3 bedroom, 2 bath ranch. And, I mean, I think about that all the time, really, like first time home buyers, because, I mean, we were in our early 20s
Oh yeah.
buying that house. And that same house, when we sold it, I'm sure it's worth more now, but it more than doubled.
Mm-hmm.
How, like, how are these young people doing this? I need their job.
It's tough. I mean, one thing is they're making more money than we did at that
Yeah.
age. The salaries are higher, but I mean, so are the costs of living. So is gas and food, and all those things are more expensive than what they were when we first purchased. But um, it can be tough. I mean, it is a challenge for younger adults coming out of college to get a good job and be able to afford a home, because yes, they're not buying 100, 125, $150,000 homes. Those pretty much don't exist anymore.
Right.
They're buying minimum $300,000 homes, some $400,000 or $500,000 starter homes. Um,
That
so
is
it's
crazy.
yes.
That's crazy. Because I'm thinking back to like our parents' houses, which, I mean, we both had, I would say, like, our houses were bigger than like starter houses.
No, I want to say my parents paid like $60,000 for their house back in the early '80s, and then we sold it before the market went up for 200,000. And it was actually really cool. It came back on the market. I had the opportunity to take my mom back
Oh,
there,
yeah. Last month.
and the guy who bought it had done a lot of work to it, which he did a great job with it. And they had it on the market for 465,000.
That is
So from
crazy.
65,000, now my parents were there 30, 30 years, over 30 years, and sold it for 200,000.
Mm,
And then this guy was there 7 years,
yeah,
and it more than doubled with him being there.
that's
Uh,
wild. Do you remember how much you sold my parents' house for?
it was around 275.
Yeah, so I think that's like about double what they paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, real
And
estate in general is a long-term investment. Um, I mean, I remember my grandparents lived in their house for 40 years, and I think they bought their house for 60 or $70,000, and we sold it for $450,000. So, in the grand scheme of things, real estate is typically a long-term investment. It's not something that you buy a house, live in for a year or two, and turn around and make, $70,000, $80,000 or more. We got spoiled back in 2020, 2021 when home prices were skyrocketing to where people were making, $75,000 to $100,000 in a year or two on their house. Um, but that's not typical. The normal average appreciation curve on a home is 3 to 4% per year. So, you get 3 to 4% appreciation every year for, 20 years. You've done well.
right,
But it's hard, in a normal market, which I don't know that we've really been in a normal market in a long time. That 3 to 4% appreciation is definitely a long-term play. It's not a short-term play. Um, so yeah, gaining appreciation on a home over a long period of time. It's kind of like sticking your money in an investment account and letting it work for you. That's really what real estate has been in the past.
We really haven't had a normal market. Like, I'm not even sure what that looks like.
Yeah, I feel like we're close now. I feel like this market feels a lot like when I first got into real estate, probably back in '05, '06, before the market crashed in '08, where you're seeing houses sitting on the market a little bit longer. You're seeing negotiations where the buyer and the seller are both giving to come to a mutual agreement. Whereas 2020, 2021, buyers were paying over asking price. They were conceding everything to the seller. The seller was getting everything they wanted. The seller was in the driver's seat and could basically dictate the entire transaction.
Hmm.
Now there's a little more give and take on both sides. So I feel like that's good and healthy for our market. Um, we just have a lot. The millennial population or generation is at the age or coming to the age where they want to own homes.
Hmm.
I think for a long time they wanted to be in the city, they wanted to be, around what was going on, and now they're kind of settling down. They I think started families a little later in their lives than previous generations have, so they're settling down a little later in their life. They're probably more established. It goes back to how are they able to afford these $400,000 or $500,000 houses? Is they're buying houses in their late 20s, early 30s,
Mm.
whereas we were buying houses in our early 20s. Fresh out of college, brand new job. They're established in their job and are making more money. Um, so they're starting to move out, and that generation is the largest generation population wise. So you've got all these people of that age trying to buy houses at the same time, and you have all the older people who are in 2 and 3% interest rates who aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
So you have a shortage of houses, affordable homes for them to purchase. Um, so yeah, it's interesting how the market adapts and moves. You've also got the baby boomer population, which was the largest generation prior to millennials. Now they're getting to retirement age, and they're wanting to downsize. It's interesting. That's an interesting move for people because they had nice houses, they had nice stuff, they lived in nice areas, and they're wanting everything that they had or have in a smaller square footage home.
You're talking about my dad.
Uh, and it's interesting. I think a lot of builders are not building formal dining rooms. That feature is kind of phasing out a little bit. Um, but that generation, the baby boomer generation, has their grandmothers or their great grandmothers' formal dining room,
Wait, is that me?
and they want a house that's smaller that fits the dining room set that they had in their larger
Yeah,
home.
we want all the crazy stuff.
Uh, so that it's an interesting move for people. From my I've never experienced it myself, but from working with clients, that's one of the hardest moves you make. Um, is realizing you probably want everything on one level. You don't want to clean a 3 or 4 thousand square foot house.
Yeah.
You want something smaller, but you want all the nice stuff and the things that you had in your larger house. So trying to fit 3,000 square feet worth of stuff in a 2,000 square foot house is a challenge, especially with dining room sets, because if you condense everything, the dining room gets condensed as well,
Hmm.
and then you don't get your large, nice dining room set in this smaller dining room, if it even has one. Like I say, a lot of builders are building large breakfast areas that will seat 8 to 10 people if you needed to. Um, instead of building dining rooms.
I could see that. I mean, I like having a dining room, but if there were a larger area, in the kitchen, then I don't know that I would need two, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I like having a dining room
Yes, you do.
mainly because that's where all the antiques are housed.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, they are.
that's why I said, like, wait a minute, am I a boomer?
Yeah.
I have all the boomer stuff.
Well, that and a lot of builders are not building bathrooms, primary bathrooms with tubs. They're building big stand-up showers, and sometimes they'll add another vanity. It'll almost give you a third vanity, not with a sink. It's just
Wait, in the master?
in the primary. Yes,
Oh no, I'm gonna need a tub.
yeah. They do have the option, but a lot of people are opting out of a tub and are opting for a very large stand-up shower.
I want both.
Well, typically you can have both, but you're not going to get a large shower. You're going to get a small shower and a tub. So definitely with the way the market is, the way the interest rates are, the way the economy is, it's different buying a home now as a young adult than it was when we were, in our early 20s. So I think if I were a young adult at this time, fresh out of college, I think I probably would rent for a short period of time to save up a little money for a down payment, because it is taking more money to purchase a home now. And then, having that money, putting down a minimum down payment and getting into something that I could afford, even if it is, a $300,000 house, banking on the appreciation and just using that as a true starter home, a home that you get into, start your family, and then, allow it to appreciate to where you can take that equity that's in that house and put it towards a down payment for something bigger.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's what I would do if I were starting out right now. Um, you don't have to buy a five or $600,000 house. We our first house was like 1,400 square feet.
Hmm.
And it actually served us very well
Yeah.
until our third child came along.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that, that was a great investment for us.
Hmm.
Like you say, it doubled in value in the time that we were there. We were able to, we used it as a rental property for a while, but we were able to use that uh, equity that we had in that property to buy the house at the lake.
Hmm.
So we were able to kind of repurpose that equity for another home. And, we just, you got to give it time. It's not something that happens overnight. You got to give it time. I mean, that is the real estate historically has been a long-term play, and it's something that you build equity over time. So yeah, I'd start out in anything that I could afford, get in it, start making payments and building equity. And then, when I had enough equity, or in our scenario, we needed an extra bedroom,
Yeah.
then you sell that house, use the equity that you have, put it down as a down payment on another house, and uh, move into that. Probably not your forever home, but that step up home, that move up house.
Yeah.
That's actually what you really need and really want.
I feel like that's not even like something that when you talk about a forever home, like you were saying your grandparents stayed in a house for 40 years, like I don't know, you don't hear of people staying at their jobs for 40 years anymore. They don't really like stay put. Um, which I mean, we're kind of our plan is also to not fall into that category. Like, we had our starter house. We're in this house until all of our kids graduate, high school, and then our plan is to go to our retirement home. I guess that's technically your forever, like the rest of your life home, but yeah, it's just different times. Like nobody stays stays put. I mean, 40 years is a long time to be in one place.
40 years is a long time. The average, it's been a couple years, I'd have to relook it up, but the average at that time that someone stayed in a mortgage, now that could be they sold their home and moved into another house, or they refinanced, was just under 5 years. So people do move around, or they refinance. I mean, the interest rates change all the time. So it's not uncommon to see people, even if they did stay in their home for 30, 40 years, to refinance 4 or 5 times during that time period.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, I mean, some people use refinancing to access the equity in their property for various expenses. Some people just, refinance to get a better interest rate. So there are a lot of reasons why people refinance their home, even if they do stay there for a while. But I think historically, when interest rates are changing and prices are changing, people move. People move different locations or different areas or different size homes.